Welcome to the Whole Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you become a fat burner, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hey guys, it's Debbie, and I'm here again with Peter Defty to talk about mitochondria health. It's a huge topic I've been really fixated on this last year, and especially 2020. I'm all about researching the mitochondria to help performance and longevity, but also, of course, to help us burn fat and optimize our fat metabolism, as Peter talks about. So Peter is on the show today because you wrote another good blog that I found that was a good one to share on your OFM website, Optimal Fat Metabolism, talking about cell health and mitochondria, how every athlete needs to know this. So we're going to share that information and your research and your thoughts on mitochondria for performance and longevity from an athlete's perspective.
Okay, great, Debbie. Where do we start? I mean, this is one of those subjects that we're going to try and cover in 30 or 40 minutes, but my advice to the audience is if you want to take a deeper dive, there's tons and tons of stuff out there, but you got the caveat is there's a lot of well-intended advice out there, but sometimes a lot of it's out of context because, it's like the internet gets people either like in this trend of intermittent fasting or keto or paleo or mitochondria, and then everybody jumps on and it's kind of a deep dive, but mitochondria go to the very core of our energy production, but that's just the start. I mean, when we're talking about athletics and performance, we're talking about energy production so we can, power our workouts and our races. But the mitochondria are really at the center of the cell, the nuclei of the cell of so many important physiological functions that are not just tangential to that energy production, but to all kinds of physiology and metabolism, as Debbie's pointed out, longevity and overall health.
So mitochondria, everyone always starts this when they talk about mitochondria, so I laugh that I'm saying this, but first thing that everyone says when you think about mitochondria, you think about what you learn in elementary school in chemistry is they're the powerhouses of the cell. I think that was the universal definition we all learned about mitochondria, but there's so much more research coming out, and the area I'm focusing on is chronic fatigue and Ari Winton's research looking at that perspective. But you're talking about today, we're going to go into the cell health and mitochondria, how it's important for the athlete, for performance, and everyone's into, your followers are wanting to learn how to optimize fat metabolism, OFM, and how to burn fat when we're exercising, and kind of talk about the role of fat metabolism in the mitochondria.
Okay, so, everybody thinks about either carbohydrates or fat in terms of the energy production. We just go right to there, and that's sort of like what we focus on. But with carbohydrates, that's just about end of story. When you're talking about concentrated carbohydrates that you're using to fuel exercise, that's about all they do. It's the end game. And because of the way carbohydrates are metabolized, especially when you're metabolizing a ton of them, there's a lot of oxidative stress. So the first step is to try to shift yourself towards more and more of a fat metabolism, because reducing that oxidative stress has huge impact on your cells and your mitochondria in terms of not doing the damage. And this is one of the paradigm shifts I talk about in terms of recovery. When people get fat adapted, when they use the Vespa product, one of the things they notice is the recovery, but their experience is recovery, and our mental mindset is we recover faster. And I'm trying to get people to recognize the fact that this is not about recovery, folks. It's about damage prevention. So you have to realize that the reason you recover faster is not recovery, it's damage prevention. And so that's the first thing, that's the first reason. But fat metabolism, the other half of fat metabolism beyond the energy production is fat metabolism is responsible for all your physiological processes, cell regeneration, mitochondrial biogenesis, hormone production, enzyme production. It's all done through a science of lipidology, and you have lipoproteins. This is what proteins attach themselves to: lipids, to fats, to be sent to the body, to be metabolized, to make muscle tissue, to make hormones.
So the oxidative stress part, though, I think is an important part of athletes, how we're exercising. And if those are still eating a lot of excess carbohydrates, that, whoops, we get frozen, that we need to pause. Okay.
Okay. So oxidative stress is a big thing when you're fueling yourself with a lot of carbohydrates. And so we want to minimize that. So the first step or the first main reason to switch to metabolizing more fat versus carbohydrates is to reduce the oxidative stress, because that damages your cells, it damages your mitochondria, it causes inflammation. It just, as Debbie likes to call it, it wreaks metabolic chaos, right?
Yeah, well, that's Reed Davis. That's not my
Okay.
words, it's his words.
Well,
So
I heard it
can't
from
claim
you,
it.
so I'm going to give you credit. So, but anyway, it wreaks a lot of havoc that your body has to compensate for. So that's the first reason to make that shift over to burning more and more fat. But the other side of fat metabolism beyond the energy, and just as importantly, is fat metabolism is responsible for all your physiologic metabolic processes, your cell regeneration, building your mitochondria, making hormones, making enzymes, creating new cell walls. Cell walls are composed of fatty acids, protein assimilation. It's lipoproteins that carry proteins and assimilate them into muscle tissue, brain cells, soft tissue. It's all done on fat metabolism or lipid metabolism. So that's the other side of it. And when we have a high glucose load, when our body's trying to get rid of all this excess glucose and using glucose as a fuel source, trying to punch in a bunch of glucose and burning through glycogen stores, you're actually impairing your fat metabolism, creating this metabolic chaos, and then your body has to recover from it. So that's the recovery side of things. And like, I'm trying to change this paradigm of thinking, because everybody experiences fat adaptation in the Vespa product from a standpoint that they recover faster. That's one of the first things everybody notes is you recover faster when you're fat adapted. You recover faster when you use the Vespa. And it really has very little to do with recovery. It really has to do with your preventing of the damage in the first place. So when you're fat adapted, you think of it as damage prevention. When you're a carb burner, you really do have to recover from all the damage you've done.
The cell damage, though, you're talking about in the muscles and, everywhere.
Cell damage throughout the body. Yeah, you've got your muscle cell damage. You've got soft tissue damage, which is what causes heart disease, because it's that inflammation in the soft tissue that causes the cholesterol deposits. You have joint inflammation. It just goes on and on and on.
So we're creating damage from excess cardio. We're creating damage from eating, if those are eating a lot of excess carbohydrate, sugar, the glucose, that's all creating oxidative stress to the cells, which damages not just the cell and the cell lining, but the mitochondria in the cell, the organelle that creates our energy.
That's exactly it. The mitochondria are one of the things that really get impacted the most. Now, because we are so robust, and this is one of the things I like to talk about, is we really are robust, because when you look at the standard population and see what's going on, there's people eating trash food, processed foods, fast foods, whatever we want to say, let alone going to whole paycheck and eating fully organic grass-fed. See, there's a spectrum, but yet there's people eating processed, trashy foods, and they're still upright and fine. And so I want athletes to take a chill pill in terms of the eating, because stress is, again, another big thing. And again, the stress impacts our mitochondria because it predisposes us to burn sugar. So on that note, we want to burn more fat so we don't impact that oxidative stress on the mitochondria, and also because fat metabolism is what's going to be key to maintaining the mitochondria you have, but also through the adaptive stress of fat adapted exercise, you're going to have this mitochondrial biogenesis, because training is one of the things, like doesn't matter whether you're a carb burner or a fat burner, training always makes people more aerobically fit, especially when you're doing endurance training. right? And
Yeah.
that's part of that is the mitochondrial biogenesis, to be able to do more beta oxidation versus glycolytic stuff. Cancer cells are wonderful at glycolytic metabolism because they don't have the mitochondria that a healthy muscle cell does.
So I'm just writing notes, but the chronic stress can be from multiple external and internal stressors. That chronic stress, you said, causes us to burn sugar because we're activating the HPA axis is going to stimulate cortisol, which cortisol is going to be created to increase our blood sugar levels, which is why I tell people for years I was insulin resistant. I was doing low carb, high fat. I was training, the low heart rate and burning fat, but because of my chronic stress, external and internal hidden stressors, I was still raising blood sugar. And I think that's an important thing to note to people. You're not only causing high blood sugar from your stress, which you just pointed out too, that stress and increasing blood sugar will create your blood sugar activation or creating energy with blood sugar. You're causing stress to your mitochondria because it's having to not oxidize fat for fuel, but you're burning sugar for fuel because of your stress. So just
That's
like
correct.
working backwards.
It's just this constant feedback loop. And like one of the things about stress and chronic stress, and then the etiology of type 2 diabetes, everybody looks at the insulin, and I'm not suggesting we don't keep an eye on the insulin and all that, but insulin's produced in the pancreas by the beta cells, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, glucagon is produced in the pancreas by the alpha cells.
Yeah.
So guess which cells get impacted the first when you're chronically producing insulin? It's your alpha cells, and that's why part of this chronic stress and type 2 diabetes, where people's blood sugar don't go down, is because their alpha cells get damaged, and then they have runaway glucagon signaling, so their liver is producing glucose all the time. It doesn't stop. And that's the backside that a lot of people don't know about.
And then what happens to the liver? The liver gets overworked because of its 500 different jobs it's doing. And then you're asking it to do even more work. So you wonder why you have liver congestion and inability to do all of its jobs. And then you have detoxification issues.
That's exactly right. So
domino.
So it's a big cascade of things that happen. So when we're talking about mitochondrial health, we're not just talking about diet. We're not just talking about training. We're talking about everyday life and everything. And it's this whole mantra of mindfulness and awareness is very important, but don't take it in a big way. It's like I tell people, especially women, because I think culturally women are trying to do all and be all right now because it's sort of been drummed into them with the feminist movement for decades. I'm not trying to harp on it, but it's just an observation. It's just women are trying to be all they can be, and they want to be perfect at it. And that's another human construct, is we want to be perfect, but biology is messy. It's not perfect. And so you want to strive for excellence. You want to be mindful, but you want to be relaxed and take your time, because that's how biology works. I mean, evolution happens over millions of years. The way our bodies work, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be, you have to be on the mark most of the time and not stressing. If you might be 90% and stressing, and that's far worse than being 80% and not stressing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think, a different topic, I'm going to do some follow-up podcasts with a couple of people about we were talking in that Facebook group page the other day about women are not small men. Dr. Stacy Sims and her book Roar, and that article in Trail Runner magazine, how it created a roar from a bunch of people because women are different than men. And, you can't, I think you always have to keep an open mind on every article and the books you read, because you don't know if they're based on high carb fueling athletes. But
that was the flaw in that thing, because the thread, to me, that thread got off topic because everybody's talking about the women being different and this and that, and from the get-go, you can see there's a bias if these people are thinking in the conventional box of carbohydrate burning athletes. Mm-hmm. And yet, yes, I'm not in disagreement that women are different in fat adaptation. For a woman, that pathway is very different and very individualized. You females are all your special snowflakes.
Well, those hormones.
Oh, I know.
Are crazy.
And you think, and you guys wonder why we're dazed and confused, because we're simple.
Well, I was laughing the other day. I was thinking, well, no wonder why I have so many gay friends, because it's easier,
well,
not have to worry about women and hormone changes if you're gay.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's like I say, why do they call gay guys gay? Because they're happy. A wink and a nod, you're there. It's just you gotta like guys to do it. And it's like, oh God.
Yeah, it's easier.
Yeah, it's a lot easier for a guy to understand a girl, and and women have their own special language in terms of they speak and communicate with each other on a number of levels that's very different from men, and we do have to acknowledge these gender differences, and women just as importantly have to recognize how simple we men are. It's like I was having a conversation this morning about this, and it's like, we want to solve the problem and move on, and women want to talk about it. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because a lot of times men just making a simple decision and moving on without thinking about the unintended consequences causes unintended consequences. So I'm not suggesting, it's sort of like a balance, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but with women, like that article, a lot of time was wasted going in different tangents and not looking at the initial thing. And it's like I said in one of my blog posts, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. And I have no doubt that David Roche and the people he cited, including Stacy Sims, the intentions are real well intended. But, when we're talking about the environment we're in, it's like, we got to think about the construct and the context of it, because, as and you've gone through your journey, fat adaptation is the place, because that's evolutionary. We're meant to burn fat aerobically.
Yeah.
And our bodies have evolved, our mitochondria have evolved for this purpose, to be optimal, burning fat as our energy source, as our metabolic and physiological source of regeneration. And we've just taken ourselves far from it. But yet the athletic world is so stuck still. As much as fat adaptation, I don't like to use the word keto, because as we all know, it's become a trend that's gotten messy.
It has.
Yeah.
What happened to paleo? It's happening keto. Next will be carnivore.
Well, I know I kind of find it funny that all the paleo gurus are now keto gurus, right?
Yeah.
And then, now we got carnivore, and we got plant-based and carnivore. And it's like I think this carnivore stuff, once again, it's well intended, but if people just stop and think, eating 4 pounds of meat, muscle meat, one time a day, I'm sorry, I don't think that that's optimal, especially if you're not, that's a lot of nitrogen to be taking in. Yeah. So once again, let's get back to it. So it's the context.
Mitochondria. So let's kind of go back to talking about how we damage the mitochondria from exercise and from eating sugar and from chronic stress in life. I think that's why I'm trying to research more about the cell health, and the mitochondria need to be so healthy to improve our performance, and how it creates energy for exercise, but also how it speeds up aging process too if they are damaged. And there's more and more research coming out that Ari Witten's talking about in his energy blueprint about the mitochondria have 2 roles of creating energy, but also cell defense mode. So if you have excess stress, they kind of hide and stop making energy, and then they're focused on, protecting the cell. And I think that's so fascinating for athletes as myself, who had chronic fatigue since 2013 and couldn't go running and have all these issues, that we got to look at, okay, not just, being fat adapted, but are your mitochondria who are making that fat, are they working at optimal level?
Well, they do go hand in hand, because when you're fat adapted, and when I focus on OFM, we're not talking about eating a lot of fat. We're talking about the physiology of metabolizing fat, because you want to have this constant flux. Your liver is like a checking account. Your fat cells are like checking accounts. You put in, you take out. You're not constantly putting it away for retirement, because that's not healthy. Because you put away too much fat, too much LDL cholesterol, it goes bad. It creates unintended consequences. So with the mitochondria, the first thing is the good thing about athletes is we're exercising, because that's, it's like I said in another blog, there's 3 things we have, and that's one is we're individuals. 2, we're meant to metabolize fat aerobically, and 3, we're meant to move a lot. And here's the thing that people, it's always this balance, and this balance works in such a way that you want to create adaptive stress. So you want to, like, the word I'm going to use is the wrong word. I don't have the right word, but you want to kind of damage the mitochondria a little. You want to create that adaptive stress. You want to push up against it.
That's a hormetic stress, though.
Right, a hormetic, exactly. A hormetic, not an acute, not acute, but a hormetic stress that is also termed an adaptive stress. So it's just enough stress that the cell says, oh, I'm weak. I need more of these. I need to make my cells bigger and stronger. And by focusing on the fat metabolism, when we do, we do this just out of training. So we always metabolize fat. Even the major carb burners are burning some level of fat. You're dead if you don't metabolize fat. Okay? So they're going to get some adaptation out of that, but why not optimize that by optimizing the delivery? So we focus, like with diet, nutrition, fueling, and hydration, we focus on the balance because, almost everybody, I wouldn't think that almost everybody listening to this podcast is eating Ho-Ho's, Twinkies, and fast food, right?
They're probably not listening, no.
Yeah, they're probably not listening to this podcast. So again, it doesn't have to be whole foods, whole paycheck, organic, hormone-free, perfect. It just has to be fresh food. If you're eating fresh, natural foods, fresh meats, eggs, fish, poultry, with the skin on it, as nature had it come as much as possible, because we live in an agricultural world, so we've modified, but just the basic stuff, produce in season, watching when you introduce concentrated food forms of carbohydrates in to fuel your workouts and refeed, then it's a given that we're getting the nutrition. It's the nutritional balance that I'm focused on. People talk, there's a big talk on optimizing nutrition about nutritional density and this and that. I'm concerned more about the balance, nutritional balance, because you need to have that balance. Otherwise we get too much of one thing and not enough of the other, and then we overeat. We get too many calories. So a perfect example is muscle meat. And this is where I think the carnivore community, not everybody, because there's some wonderful people in the carnivore community and everybody means well, but when you eat a lot of muscle meat, you're getting way too much of the amino acid methionine. And you have to balance that out by eating things like liver and joint tissue to get the other amino acids and minerals that are cofactors in metabolizing the methionine properly. Because if you eat a lot of muscle meat, it converts to homocysteine. Elevated homocysteine levels have been shown to be a really key marker for heart disease. Perfect example. And that's where the vegetarians have a good reason to talk about muscle meat, but they don't really understand how you solve that. When you eat that balanced nutrition, where you're getting that right balance, and it's not perfect, you need much less. And that's why that mix of eating the whole animal, eating non-starchy vegetables and fruits you eat like vegetables, and then having the fats you need to make it taste good or to cook it in or put a dressing on, that's just sort of the relaxed, approachable basics. And then adding carbohydrate-based foods to strategically to fuel your higher level or longer duration exercises. From observational experience, that seems to work the best, because deep keto, while good for a lot of things, is a conservation mode. So it does limit your metabolism ability to push, whereas getting fat adapted by using ketosis as a tool to gain that adaptation, and then bringing in the carbohydrates to push your workouts, actually is going to stimulate that hormetic response, that adaptive stress that's going to tell your body, oh, I got to make more mitochondria. I got to make my mitochondria more robust, because you're going to burn up a little, but you're not going to burn up a lot. Like if you're fueling with pasta the night before and burning through your glycogen and just wrecked after, you've done a lot of damage that you have to kind of recover from. Whereas when you're fat fueled, you're just kind of pushing against that mitochondria as sort of a metaphorical thing. You know, it's like taking like a boxer taking a jab, and then that heavyweight's going to go bam, mitochondria. You know, your mitochondria is going to hit back real hard by making more and just overwhelming, you know, the cells with plenty of robust mitochondria.
So I just
But
want to add,
it's all done on nutritional balance.
yeah, like I say, the Goldilocks effect. But I was also thinking too, to add in, since it's, you know, we're putting this podcast out beginning of the year, people are all, you know, trying to become fat adapted, and you're saying, you know, to be strict keto, say do more lower carb for 4 to 6 weeks to become fat adapted, then start to implement a little bit more carbohydrates to still, once you're the fat adaptation, flipping that switch, so to speak, to help our body burn fat for our main fuel source instead of being sugar burners. Kind of maybe touch on that subject, because it does help our mitochondria to burn fat, because burning carbohydrates, that's extra stress. And what they say, this, I'll just add the energy blueprint, then
well, and this is where okay, so it varies. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're already a fairly well aerobically trained athlete and you don't have a lot of garbage food in your diet, but you're not doing keto or fat adaptation yet, it may only be 3 to 5 days of feeling off and not exercising or doing low intensity exercise, or it could be 3 to 5 weeks. You know, it just depends on where somebody is, and somebody might also have like underlying conditions they need to address, because if you have an underlying condition, you're in a stress mode, you're in fight or flight, so you tend to burn sugar. So identifying that, a lot of times, you know, looking at thyroid issues, hormonal health, and just getting the garbage, the obvious suspects like the soda pop, the baked goods, getting that out of the system, and then weaning off other concentrated carbohydrates, and then trying to see so you're not going full keto, because all of a sudden you're adding another stress. So if you have an underlying condition and you try to go keto, you try to exercise, you're going to have that cascade, that hormonal cascade of hormonal stress, and for a woman it can be disastrous, right? For a male, he's just going to want to be lazy and not have sex, or even think about sex, because his testosterone. Well, I know, but it's a testosterone tanks, right? It's simple with a man,
hormones.
but with a woman, the way the hormone sensitivities are with a woman, it not only affects their hormonal health, but their psychological, emotional health on really levels. So it's because women are just more protective.
Well, let me just throw in there too that I think a lot of women, as you read those Facebook pages, the group pages, that everyone, because we're talking towards athletes and people are exercising, versus what we've said in our other podcasts, that a lot of people that are doing strict keto, they have health issues, they're not active, they're sedentary. We're talking fat burning, fat optimization for those that are active, and you're athlete and you're training and you're racing at higher levels. So I think so many people are afraid of any carbohydrates, and the focus today is mitochondrial health, but I think it connects with it. It's to optimize your mitochondria. It is doing low carb and not burning sugar, burning fat, and getting the mitochondria to be bigger, stronger engines. But it doesn't mean zero carb. And I think that's where so many people in these group pages get confused, is like, okay, like you said, there's 2 camps, and we're talking for the athletes, how to burn fat doesn't mean zero carbs, and it's okay to have some, and you can still be fat burners.
Oh, yeah.
And even intermittent fasting, I'll just finish with, is the other thing everyone's like, okay, you know, and I'll just finish with that, is all of it is the N equals 1, and you got to feel good and feel energetic. But go ahead with that.
Yeah. And so the thing is like Debbie said, you know, when you're sedentary, that to me is a compromised state. That's a disease state. I'm kind of going a little over the top. And once again, Peter's going out there like 10, 12 years ago, when I was talking about carbs were the problem and you need to metabolize fat. Everybody thought I was nuts. But the sedentary lifestyle is a disease state from an evolutionary standpoint, because when you were sedentary, you were compromised.
Yep.
Okay. And so our entire health, wellness, fitness is based on this false assumption. So what does that tell you about the science? Ask yourself this. Okay. So what we found is, in the ketogenic diet, when you're sedentary, you have to have that strictness, but part of that whole thing going back to the mitochondria is when you become active, when you stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, that window of carbohydrate tolerance opens way up. With young males, it's back to the old carb loading days, and it doesn't phase their fat adaptation. I mean, they can pile on 300-400 grams of carbs the day before a race, and all it does is make them go fast. Doesn't impact their fat metabolism one iota. They're only putting in maybe 150 grams of hour, not 300-400 grams an hour, because they just don't need it. So, for a middle-aged, like a woman in her 30s or 40s, maybe not so much, who's been a carb-borne burner. So there's a big spectrum, but as you improve your aerobic fitness and your mitochondrial density, that window of tolerance opens way up. Plus carbs, as we said before, help to drive your performance. Now, on the flip side, with intermittent fasting, you want to cycle in that, because when we're constantly bludgeoning ourselves with too much energy, whether it's fat energy, protein energy, carb energy, that's putting a stress load on the body. And this is where, intermittent fasting, doing fasted workouts at the level you can do them, the level and duration you can do them, is very good for cleansing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think just to tie this at the mitochondria, just looking up that, how to build your cellular engine. Ari went and talks about just everything we're talking about: exercising, not too much, not too little, the right amount, the intermittent fasting, intermittent nutrient cycling of carbs, fat, proteins, the cold, heat, red and near infrared light, hypoxia, oxygen bankruptcy, UV light, xenobiotics, and dietary phytochemicals, and going over the research. And I think, for athletes, if you're trying to improve performance and you're focused on longevity, as I am, as I get in my late 40s, and you just turned 60, and, look at how great you are. And I think it's not, I just think you have to be careful. Endurance athletes, it's stressful when you're on your body and you're creating the oxidative stress, and how we can, really optimize our health, our mitochondria, making them stronger and getting more of them, because as we talked about in the beginning, we're creating oxidative stress from exercise. So what can we do to get more mitochondria, make them stronger and bigger as we age, as we keep training and racing, as we get older?
Right. And part of this is hormonal and mitochondrial. You have to keep putting that hormetic stress, so you're signaling to your body it has to get stronger. So it does increase the mitochondrial biogenesis. It does create the hormonal responses to overcome that challenge, that metabolic challenge you're giving it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think happens to a lot of people in the main population, is you just kind of segue into doing less and less and less, and then you're not giving that stimulus to continue to stay better. And what we've seen is, with a lot of the middle-aged athletes I coach, particularly a lot of women, females in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, they're finding that they call it a reverse aging process, because they feel decades younger and stronger. And I think that as long as that aging process is there, it's part of biology, but if we're constantly challenging the system, we can slow it down to that crawl. And part of that is that hormonal signaling and mitochondrial biogenesis that does it by doing the challenge. So, people here listening are athletes, you have to keep doing it. But what we want to do is, as you're giving your body that challenge to provide that signal, give it that nutrient balance, because as I said, by default, most of the listeners, 99.9%, are already eating pretty darn good foods. And give yourself the fasting periods to take the load off the mitochondria from having to deal with excess energy, because that's one of the big things I'm seeing, is less is more, because because the environment we're in, we just get too much everything. So
that was my next topic, to talk about fasting, because eating less frequently during the day, like doing time restricted eating in an 8-hour window versus eating over 15 hours in a day. But the cell autophagy, if we're trying to get rid of, we're creating damage to our cells, and then we have these dead, damaged cells we want to get rid of, and we want to build new ones. We want to get rid of the garbage and rebuild or get stronger mitochondria and get more of them. So maybe let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, think about it. Think about like a car engine. It's like because evolutionarily we now have availability of food that we used to have to go out and get, and it took a lot of physical activity to do that. And we're made to be very efficient. We didn't overeat. That's why people, when you look at pictures from way back when, nobody was fat. So think of it like a car engine. If your motor's getting way too much fuel, it's running at full bore the whole time. You got to give it that rest period by turning down. Now, your mitochondria don't turn off like a car engine, but you want to get them down to that low RPM, much easier cruising pace that, they're just kind of in that homeostasis where you're cruising. It's well known that you can put a lot more miles on a car if you're cruising along at 60 miles an hour, 65 miles an hour, rather than stopping and starting and accelerating to 80 and then stopping and jamming on the brakes. That's going to, it's going to wear you out. So think of it that way, is like you give these fasting periods where you lower your intensity level and volume of training. You lower your stress loads, which is a key part of fasting, because if you're stressing during fasting, you're thinking about food, you've already failed at the goal of the fast. Fasting should just happen, and you don't even think about it.
What about fasted workouts? That was a big thing in our thread. Yeah. See, once again, if you're fat adapted and you're experiencing all the benefits of fasting and fat adaptation, then fasted workouts are fine. But remember, like that article was, it was kind of clear from the onset. If you looked at it, step back and look at it, these guys were looking through the lens of a conventional carbohydrate-based fast, where you got to, you're told to eat before, you're told to eat during, you're told to eat after, right? Yeah.
I think that people should, it really depends. If you didn't have dinner the night before and you wake up and you're a little peckish, yeah, have a little something. I tend to tell people a lot of times a hot beverage with some cream or coconut oil or whatever fat works for them, and a little bit of honey or sugar. That hot beverage actually helps to emulsify the fat and your digestive tract absorb it. So if you're going out for a long endurance workout, that can be a very good way. Broth is another thing. You can use broth with either cream or sour cream or coconut milk in it. Those are good strategies if you haven't eaten. But if you had a big meal the night before, most people, including females, they'll wake up in the morning and they're not going to be hungry. So you you need to go out and eat, right?
But that's what I was reading in that book, Roar, and I've read this all the time in articles that you have to wake up and eat. But if you're burning fat while you're sleeping, I'm not going to wake up and have low glycogen stores.
How hungry are you in the morning?
Yeah, I'm not.
Debbie?
Till,
you don't want to eat.
Yeah, I'm not. And I get up at 4:30. I work out 5:30 a.m., 6:30 a.m. because that's how I roll. But it is, easy to go fasted. If I eat before I work out, I would throw up and regurgitate what I just ate.
Right, and it's an individualized thing, but and that's why I say is like you look at somebody like you who's actually been down that carbohydrate road and recovered from it, and now where you are now, you've recovered to where you don't need one, and then you look at that article and they're saying you gotta, they're kind of suggesting this is dangerous.
Yeah, but I was fasting and doing this for 15 years when I got my health issues. So I was not doing carbohydrates since, I don't know, wherever along, but when I got my fatigue and with HP axis, adrenal fatigue, mitochondrial dysfunction, whatever you want to call it, everything, metabolic chaos, that I was, because for women, I think I was doing stressful life and I was doing way too much fast because I was too strict, and I would be, bulletproof coffee, and have like a gallon of it and not eat. Right.
But that's my point is like fasting should just happen. It just, you're not hungry, you don't eat. One of the best things people can do, and this is a good one of the closing things we'll do is the first thing, if you're a carbohydrate burner, or even if you're a keto person who's snacking a lot, the best thing you can do is, the first thing we do with optimized fat metabolism when we get them on a hard reset is we get the snacking out.
Yes.
Get people down to 3 meals a day, then down to 2. And some people go 1 meal with like a snack or something like that, or a coffee with cream in the morning, because snacking constantly pings the 3 main hormones that get pinged is insulin, ghrelin, and leptin. And of course, women women produce a lot more leptin, but because they produce a lot more leptin, they're much more prone to becoming leptin resistance. And then that overrides everything. All of a sudden they're hungry and snacking all the time.
That's what I think of the full button. You don't have that full button, because I'll feel that way.
Right.
It's like, okay, I just ate, and why am I not full?
Yep, and that's the leptin thing. And you know, like I say, we're not ruminants. We're not grazers. We're meant to feed intermittently. And so the first thing you want to do is get off the snacking. It's pretty easy to do by getting from meal to meal, but then you can use things like broth. You don't have to put a lot of collagen in it, but just broth, because it keeps you got to keep your electrolytes up. That's a key way. The Vespa, we use that because instead of a snack at 10 and 3, like a lot of people are accustomed to in their day, take a Vespa at 9 and 2, and it just boom, blunts the hunger. But keep yourself hydrated and keep yourself occupied, because if you're sitting around doing nothing, you're going to start thinking about food, especially if you're females. Like I say, women think about food the way men think about sex. And I said this to one of my close athlete friends, and she goes, "Yeah, you think about sex that much?" Go, well, yeah. Anyway, but the point there is keep yourself occupied, keep yourself hydrated, and then also particularly important for women is light physical activity will signal to your body you're active, so it'll recruit that fuel flow to get the ketones, glucose, and free fatty acids flowing. If a woman sits, it signals she's sedentary. It starts to guard, and then it starts to look for more. So I found that this, for women particularly, light physical exercise in a fasting period, whether it's cleaning house or cleaning up a closet or doing a light workout, is really a good strategy. Just to keep off snacking. Because if you, like I said, and just like in your case, you were doing the strict fasting, but you were thinking about the stress is just that if you're stressing about your fast, you failed at the goal of the fast.
Yeah, well, I just stress about life.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, you're triggering all these physiological processes that defeat the purpose of a fast.
Yeah, I do it easily when I'm working and I have appointments or something. Like yesterday, I didn't get home till 3 o'clock. It's like, oh, I haven't eaten. But if I don't have a busy day, then you're like, oh, you do think of food, so it's easier to
because you're a girl.
Your brain. I'm not thinking about sex every hour, thinking of food. Just kidding. So just to summarize, people can go to OFM website. Is it OFM.io? What does it say?
Yep, I optimize. Think of it as OFM, I optimize.
Okay. And then optimal fat metabolism will give you the foundation to create the environment of robust mitochondria and mitochondrial biogenesis. So you guys can read more on Peter's blog and little video blog, or it's called blog, to get more out of it. So let's give 5 takeaways to improve the mitochondria. What can people start doing now? And we'll wrap it up.
Well, first of all, think about fat adaptation. Do your homework. We don't want to foist this on you, but think about it. Like I said, when you think about how many calories we have on our bodies of fat versus glycogen, makes a lot of sense that we're meant to burn our body fat, not keto, fat bombs, bulletproof coffee, gallons of bulletproof coffee, like Debbie says, our own body fat. Get fat adapted, get your nutritional balance, because as we're talking about, almost everybody out there isn't eating Ho-Hos and Twinkies and Mickey D's. Okay, you're eating healthy food, so don't worry about the food quality because you're already doing it right. Just get that nutrient balance. Part of that is by eating fresh, non-starchy vegetables and fruits you eat like vegetables, like avocado, tomatoes, eggplant, zucchini, and eating the whole animal. Now, if most of you aren't going to be wanting to eat liver and tripe and all those other things that I love to eat, so liver capsules, collagen, gelatin and collagen are the same thing. You just pay more when they call it collagen. If you like Jell-O, just eat Jell-O. I've got a guy who's not an athlete, but he's very active. And I got him, I just said, start eating some Jell-O because he had a shoulder surgery. And he came back to me a couple of months. He goes, you're right. My hair, my nails, everything feels better. So
but do you do sugar-free Jell-O? Because I see these keto people buying all this processed foods and then they got the fake sugars in there. So
well, I know it's not. I'm just saying. If you like Jell-O, have Jell-O. It's a good way to start, and use the sugar-free if you can. It's choose your poison. We have on our Pinterest board. We have some We have some gelatin treats you make with juice. And like I said, it's not perfect. There'll be juice, but there's one with like crushed pineapples and coconut milk, which is really yummy. And these are like collagen bombs. So eat the whole animal. Train, so you give yourself that adaptive stressor, that hormetic response. So you get the hormetic response of supercompensation. Understand.
But add some intervals though, right? Too. So a lot of
well, it's everything.
long, slow, and hit.
It's long, slow. It's intervals. And one of the keys, Debbie, a good point you bring up is with OFM and fat adaptation. Your intervals, you want to time your intervals so that the on interval section is short and very sharp, and then the recovery interval is very long, because you want to do the interval where you're stressing your system all the way to its aerobic max. It looks like a glycolytic exercise, but like we do a run thing called the 20-60s, and it's 20 seconds on, 60 seconds off. First 5 to 7 seconds of that 20 seconds on, you're accelerating. You just don't go from 1 to full bore, but you accelerate to top speed, hold it for 15 to 13 seconds, and then fully recover. So you get the CO2 out, you get the oxygen back in, and then you do another one, and you're just going up to that aerobic limit rather than going glycolytic. And then that stress, that gives that hormetic stress that triggers the body to get better at producing more mitochondria, more dense mitochondria, so you can burn more fat at higher intensity. So yeah, interval training you need interval, tempo, and the long stuff. You need it all. So the people who are saying you just need interval training, they're just as wrong as the people who are just doing nothing but cardio. I mean, you need the whole
effect
mix.
Again, it's everything. It's not just one or the other. You need a blend.
You need that blend, and you need that blend to work for you. It's also going to be not stressing. Make sure you match your training load to your life load, and all that. Those are key things. And then, get off the snacking, no matter what you are. So
good.
Yeah.
That's great. And I'll just throw in there too, I really stress the importance of people wearing a heart rate monitor, because you think you're going hard and you're not, or you're not recovered enough. So using a heart rate monitor for keeping your heart rate low enough. And then when you do HIIT training, train high heart rate for that interval, but wait till you kind of that rest-based training method that you get your heart rate down before you start the next one, or time it, but you don't know what you don't know, right? So if you don't have those numbers in your heart rate monitor.
I've got some key points to that. So with training, when you're fat adapted, you got to warm up. Do a 30-minute, people need to understand they need to do a 30-minute warm up at least. I mean, 20 minutes is a minimum, but I like to see people 30 minutes, because what we're seeing in the data is you can see what I call the switch go between 30 and 35 minutes for most people. And that's because you have to have that hormonal and enzymatic upregulation. When your body starts exercising, it's going from sedentary to active. So it's not like your car where you push on the gas and all of a sudden there's fuel instantly. It takes that 30 minutes to upregulate, and look for it and feel that switch. So when you do an interval workout, wait till you feel that switch, because then you're fully fat adapted and you will leverage your fat adaptation, because now you're burning fat. So definitely do that warm up and look for that switch, because that's going to be key to, it's key.
All right, we got to wrap it up, guys. I always think to do 30-45 minutes, but I could do this topic for 2 hours. So I'm doing kind of a series of mitochondria podcasts and sharing research. So figure out what to have you talk about next time. If you guys have questions, you can go to the Low Carb Athlete page, the Whole Athlete page on Facebook, or email me on my website, debbiepotts.net. And then Peter, how can people reach out to you?
Okay, super. No, we're here to support you.
You didn't answer my question. How do people...
okay.
Where do you want them to go to email you?
So there's 2 places to go. OFM.io, iOptimize. Think about optimal fat metabolism, iOptimize, and then vespapower.com. And what we've done is we've separated the two to kind of make it much more easy to understand. The vespapower.com is the product side. We've got the Vespa product. We've got supplements that we've found work well in the whole optimized fat metabolism, including that whole animal eating, getting the gelatin, the magnesium, liver in. And so those are things that, so those are the 2 places you want to go. We have a great Pinterest board.
What's it called?
OFM Pinterest board. I guess I'll have to send you a link to that, huh?
Yeah, I'm low carb athlete on Pinterest. I have a ton of boards. I need to combine them, but that's a fun place to find things.
The other last thing I'm going to leave you with, since we're at this time of year, is make sure you get your vitamin D up.
Yes, especially
that's going to have
Seattle,
huge impact on your mitochondrial health. I mean, if your vitamin D is low, it's signaling senescence, it's signaling wintertime. Your mitochondria aren't going to upregulate like you should want them to.
Yes. Amen.
Okay.
All right, guys. Send questions to Peter or I, and we'll follow up next time on our next co-podcast.
Yeah, looking forward to it, Debbie. This was a good podcast. We're really kind of getting in a rhythm here.
I know. It's fun to have someone instead of talking to myself on a screen. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to the Whole Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at wholeathletepodcast.com. You can help us continue and grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and see you next time.